All right. So, welcome back to the third and the final session in this short three-part series in on the topic exploring the dimensions of life beyond career and academics. I'll just quickly kind of take a stock of what we've been able to cover so far. Number one, in the first part of the presentation, we saw that we have every human being has four dimensions of living, and that they are inalienable and inseparable for every human being on this planet. In part two of the presentation, we saw that there is a need to resolve these dimensions of living, which is essentially to understand each and everything that comprises them. And the reason for that is that we have three sets of experiences. The material dimension, or to do with the behavioral dimension, as well as the intellectual dimension, and I've kind of included the spiritual dimension in it as for now. And now in the third part of the presentation, we are going to see what is it that we really need to understand. All right. Before we get into what the subject matter for our understanding should be, let me address a small thing, something that many of you may be quipping, or that may come to your mind, saying, this is pretty straightforward, right? It all seems very straightforward. So you may feel that I actually know all this. What's the big deal? Why should I spend so much of time trying to get into all this, or to be listening to all this? So let's see what is it that we really understand, or whether or not we really understand these issues or these dimensions of living in that comprise us, that comprise human living. The first is, let's look at the material dimension of living, and I've also put the dollar sign there because it is to do with money, right? We usually think that we understand the material dimension, right? So, and there's no doubt a good element of truth there, because we are able to understand the behavior of physical chemical phenomena because of the advances using the scientific method that the world has seen in the past 300 odd years, especially, right? So we understand material behavior very well, thanks to physics and chemistry and biology, and we've been able to come up with a lot of man-made combinations, correct? So we are able to understand how nature behaves, and we are able to put it to use in ways in which we would like it to behave. So for example, everybody is busy trying to find a vaccine, for this new COVID-19 virus, right? So that's going to take place using cutting edge biotech, and there are companies in India and worldwide that are actually, working on that. But the question that still remains unanswered in this area is, let's take the example of money, right? Do you know how much money you want? It's a very simple question. There may be a lot of answers out there, but do we really know what the basis for how much money is really needed to live a fulfilling human life? That's the big question that is in front of every human being, correct? Or if I bring the conversation from money to, let's say, things, how many things do you need? How many clothes do you need? How many shoes do you need? How many houses do you need? How much of territory should India own? Correct. These are questions that we still don't have real answers to. The third question is also very pertinent for today's times: is how much can we really, use the earth? How much can we mine the earth? How do we know how much is enough? All right. So on the one hand, we have this need to, feed the world. On the other hand, the planet consists of limited resources. So today, everyone or some people are talking of actually going to a planet like Mars and making a human settlement there. So a lot of interesting kind of options that people are throwing up, but you can very clearly see that we are really not sure about the answers to these questions. We really don't know what the answers to these questions really are in a universal and in a studyable fashion. So if I summarize this area, we can see that the behavior of material things is definitely certain. The natural laws that nature behaves, the laws of physics, or physics is able to find out the laws that nature behaves. Let me put it that way. Similarly, in chemistry and biology and so forth, but the human relationship with these entities is still uncertain. In other words, science is certain, but the scientist's relationship with the things that he or she studies is still uncertain. Correct? So I'm able to study the planet, I'm able to study its laws, I'm able to modify it in ways that I would like to modify it, but I still don't know what exactly I'm supposed to do with it. I can get some pleasure or pain using the goods that are produced, but I don't know how much I should keep. I don't know how much to mine the earth. So this is one area in which we can see that our behavior is, that our relationship with the material world is really uncertain. The second one is the behavioral aspect of living, and we can clearly see that there is a lot of uncertainty that that we really have here. Correct. For example, let's take the first thing of parents. As a as a child, Do you know what your relationship or what your expectation is from your father? Do you know it for sure? Do you know what your father really expects from you? Do you know what your mother really expects from you? Or do you end up having, arguments and fights and, I don't know, flare-ups with them? All right. So you can easily see that our parents don't respond in the way that we think they should be responding. And you can also see that with siblings, with a brother or a sister. And we see that we run into a lot of problems in that area as well. And we really don't know why they behave in that way. We don't understand why our parents are not able to understand us, or why a brother or a sister, ends up dominating us, or you end up being dominated by somebody that you really live with. Correct? So when it comes to living with people, we find that we are very short of the kind of understanding that is needed, that really defines the laws of human relationships. All right. The second example that I have down there is also the relationship you have with friends and peers. So a person who is a friend today may stop being a friend tomorrow because of some misunderstanding, or because their behavior was unexpected and you didn't like what they said, or maybe they cheated on you, or maybe you found out that they were thinking of cheating you and things like that. Similarly, also peers. Peers are, the other people that you grow up with in school and college and at work. When you actually get down to work, we also find that it becomes very hard to understand how people operate and why they operate in certain ways. So any organization that you belong to comes with its own set of rules of do's and don'ts, and who's the boss and who's going to listen to them, and how, to what extent they're supposed to listen to them. But you will see that, or you must have read of a lot of problems that occur in this area as well. Correct? Bosses that dominate, maybe I am dominating and you don't like being dominated, or somebody didn't listen to what you said, what you were saying, or they said that they'll do something and they didn't end up doing it, and so on and so forth. Similarly, we're also uncertain about somebody in society, and I've written the man down the street. We don't understand what that person is. We don't know, what my relationship with that human being is. Is it because I'm an Indian? Is it because of my religion? Is it because of my gender? Is it because we both share the same language, and so on and so forth? And of course, we have neighboring countries. So when you go beyond society, the nation state, and I've written a country that's a nice neighbor of ours, and of course a lot of other neighbors that we have. But all across the world, you see that anybody that lives in a particular country really doesn't know what to make of somebody else from a different country. Correct? So our identity is also associated with the particular country that you belong to. And of course, we are also uncertain about different religious beliefs that people may have. You may or may not believe in a particular religion, you may or may not practice it, but the fact of the matter is we really don't understand why people who adhere to certain religions, or in fact to every religion, may behave in certain ways. So net, you can see that although in the material dimension, we understand the laws by which nature behaves, our relationship with it is uncertain. In this case, we neither understand the people that we live with, either a parent or a friend, a colleague, or a man down the street, or a neighboring country, or somebody that belongs to a particular religion. And because we don't understand them, we also don't understand the nature of our relationship with them. So this leaves us with a feeling of uncertainty, and this actually starts impacting our life. Right. So in the recent past few days, you must have read of a lot of skirmishes that were taking place in the border, and I'm sure a lot of people have been feeling very angry and very emotional about it. But I'm sure a similar story is being propagated on the other side of the border, where people from the other country have, harboring similar feelings about us. So we really don't understand human beings, whether they are inside the house or outside the house. We may feel we understand them, but you do find that there are periods of uncertainty, and there are moments, of frustration in there. So that's the second one. When it comes to your intellectual dimension of living, which is your thought or your mind, or yourself, we find that uh, really deciding whether I'm right or wrong becomes very difficult. How do you know you're right? Usually, I mean, it's easy to say, okay, I'm right all the way, but then you just need to ask somebody you're interacting with, and they'll tell you that no, your behavior wasn't right, and I think you're wrong. Do I even know I've made the right choices in life? Was it the right course to attend? Is this the right job to take up? Is this the right person to marry? Or which school should I send my child to? So this question of right and wrong actually causes a lot of uncertainty in us, and uncertainty is popped up right there. Similarly, how do I know whether I'm good or bad? What should be the basis for saying whether I'm a good person or a bad person? correct? So good or bad is decided, I don't know, by the expectations of the people around us. Sometimes the religion, I mean, if you adhere to a particular religion, or if you follow or practice a religion, kind of lays down the set of rules, set of do's and don'ts that you should be following. But then many of us oftentimes find that something that is said in religion does not tally with a finding of reality as far as science is concerned. And also many a times we also come across situations where there is a lot of I would say dichotomy or conflicting statements that a particular religious system may also make. Sometimes what you feel as good or bad or right or wrong may not be the same that the religion that you are born into or that you follow also say. There are also questions of whether I'm also intelligent or dumb, because you can see that these are relative statements, and all of us go through this kind of comparison as we grow up. We are constantly comparing ourselves with people around us, and by constantly I don't mean we're doing it all the time, but it comes naturally to human beings. You can see that children also do the same thing, and then we also end up wondering whether we are actually better than the other. And this is a very important point to actually pay attention to, because our entire education system today, at least in India, or in most parts of India, or most schools in India, we are taught to compete since childhood, correct? So there are marks, and then there is a grade. There's you're either first in the class, or second in the class, or third, and so on and so forth. And it is not uncommon to see that this kind of rating or grading is actually very, very relative in nature. When you get out of the particular school or college that you belong to, or let's say you get into a particular college, and then you find that you thought that you were the best in your class, but when you reach a good set of people, or a class where everybody knows as much as you do, it can lead to a lot of frustration and sometimes also depression. We oftentimes hear of students committing suicide from some of the best institutes in this country, because they didn't come first in class, or because they were afraid that they will fail. And these are students who put in a lot of hard work to get where they have. And so this is something that we can observe. Another kind of uncertainty that you also undergo is also regarding our physical looks, correct? If you pay attention, or if you scrutinize it, you will see that your body is actually material in nature, all right? And you have no say in how you look. Like, for example, I'm, let's say, wheatish complexion. I have had no say in what complexion I have. I'm 6 feet 2 inches in height, but that's not because I did something. I just happen to be 6 feet 2 inches in height. I don't have blonde hair, and I can't do anything about it, right? I don't have a sharp nose, and I can't do anything about it. So as far as physical appearances are concerned, you can clearly see that these are this is a natural phenomena, and you basically end up getting the kind of physical appearance that your parents, or the particular family lineage that you are born into, has provided you. And this oftentimes, or many a times, leads us into a lot of doubt and uncertainty within ourselves of whether we are good looking or not. Maybe you are a little overweight, or maybe you are very overweight, and that can also cause feelings of guilt within every time you try to eat. Maybe you are fit and fine, and now you're worried about whether you will continue to be fit and fine. Maybe you think you're good looking, but then people don't appreciate you and don't say that you're good looking. So our sense of identity many a times is also associated with the way our body is, and you can see that the body is actually a material thing, all right? So if you look at it, I put out the kind of uncertainties, or some uncertainties, that we face in these three aspects of our living. The spiritual dimension, of course, remains uncertain for many of us, or most of us. Some of us may believe that we know what who we are, and what the nature of reality is, and who we are as people, and what the meaning of human life is. But you will oftentimes find that that has been derived from some kind of religious belief, and what you believe in, it may not be what somebody else believes in. So it's very hard to come up with a universal answer for questions that are raised in this space, in the philosophy or the spiritual department. All right. So it's easy to see that so you may, I mean, I started the slide with saying you may assume that you understand things. I have spent a little bit of time talking about the uncertainties that you may have, and not saying that you may actually have all of these, but you may have some or all of these, or maybe many more of these. But usually you see that we really don't understand, all right? We think we understand, but what we actually have is incomplete views or wrong assumptions about all these things. I have an incomplete view about myself. I have an incomplete or a wrong assumption of behavior. I have an incomplete or a wrong assumption about how to interact with nature. For example, if I have an assumption that, the earth is basically for the exploitation of human beings, I am going to run out of resources very soon. right? It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure that out, because the earth has limited resources, your needs are unlimited, and if your population is also not going to be definite and everybody has unlimited resources, the earth is finite, and then even one planet is not going to be sufficient. You're going to be start looking at colonizing another planet, and so on and so forth. So this, one can easily see, is maybe a wrong assumption about our relationship, a human being's relationship with the planet. Similarly, you may have a wrong assumption about what it means to be a parent or a child. Correct? So you may assume that your father's job is to make sure that he provides for you and he keeps saying yes to all your demands. That particular assumption may be right or wrong. Your father's assumption may be totally different. He may assume, or his assumption or expectation may be, that you listen to and adhere to everything that he says. So you can clearly see that your assumption from your father and your father's assumption from you may be totally contrary, or also not match, and that is when there is a friction that takes place in the relationship, and that's where the misunderstanding and the unhappiness and the lack of trust and the feeling of hatred, etc., arises as far as relationships are concerned. You can see a similar thing in siblings as well. So let's say you're an older brother, you may assume, without really knowing it, that your job is to show the path to your younger sibling, right? To tell them what is true and false and to keep correcting them. And you will find, or you may find, that your younger sibling does not like it. They don't want to be corrected all the time. If you are the younger sibling, then you don't want to be dominated on by your older sibling or your parents. Similarly, when you get down to work, you may not like it that your boss ticks you off in front of everyone, right? Or calls you names, or asks you to get out of the office in front of everyone. You will end up feeling insulted. Similarly, when you yourself do that, you will find that the person you actually throw out of office has started hating you, and that really causes a friction in that particular relationship. You can see the similar thing in the fourth point down there, right? The man down the street. If you are a man down the street and you're waiting, let's say at a traffic signal, and somebody shouts at you and insults you, you're not going to like it. Correct? So we also have these assumptions all the way to the neighboring country, and also religion. And I'm not saying every religion is only a set of beliefs, but there can be beliefs based on religion. So net we can see that these uncertainties that we have are because of incomplete views or wrong assumptions that we have, and we actually believe that these assumptions are actually my understanding. Correct? And you can also see that usually we are also largely unaware of our own assumptions and beliefs. It is people around us that really point us out to our mistakes. Most of us are not able to see our own mistakes or our own beliefs, and you will also see that your whole view of who you are as a person, how you should be living with people, what is the meaning of family and a husband and wife, how you're supposed to interact with nature, what the ultimate nature of reality is not something that you figured out for yourself, but it is really something that you picked up from the environment around you. It is from the books you've read, the influences that you had from movies and media, etc. Correct? So this also goes to things like whether you're good looking or not, because good looking is a very relative statement. Correct? It keeps changing from time to time. At one point in time, skinny people are good looking. At another point in time in human history, heavy set people are good looking. You can also see it if you live in India and you're watching this video. You can see that the different regional movies that are made all have actors and actresses of different sizes, because every state has its own assumption, correct, or preference of what a good looking actor size should be like. Correct? And whether they should be well built or not, whether they should be fair skinned or dark skinned, whether they should have short hair or long hair, and things like that. And this also changes with time. So one of the recent phenomena that I've seen is, a lot of men out there are sporting beards, right? At one point in time, sporting a beard was seen as being, non-chic. It was not modern, so you had to be clean shaven. And nowadays, you see that wearing a beard is actually, a measure of being in or being along with the times. So net our whole view of living in all these areas, you can see, is driven by a whole set of assumptions, and we may assume that it is understanding, but with a little bit of scrutiny you can find that it is really not understanding, but really a set of beliefs or assumptions that really change with time. Let's go to the next slide. Before that, so while all this is happening, you can see that our individual educational and societal focus is still only on the material dimension, correct? Whereas it is all these set of assumptions that are really deciding what you are going to do with your life. And this is not just for the educated. Even a so-called uneducated person or an illiterate person or a poor person or a rich person too has these sets of assumptions. Correct? You can see that the problems in the behavioral dimension are not restricted only to people who have money or people who do not have money. It has got nothing to do with that. Fights can happen in a rich house or a poor house, in a CEO's house or in the watchman's house. A fight can happen in a Muslim's house or a Hindu's house or a Sikh's house or a Christian's house or a Judaic house or somebody that believes in Buddhism and so on and so forth. So these things that you're talking of are not just pertaining to people who've gone to college or just to an engineer and so on and so forth. You can see that these things generically apply to every human being on this planet. Let's go to the next slide. So before we do that, in the previous slide, just to reiterate, we saw that we don't have understanding. There is a need to understand, and we don't have understanding. We have assumptions, and these assumptions could be wrong, and our views are also incomplete. So now the question that arises is, what is understanding? What is it that I have to understand? The answer is pretty straightforward. Let's take our aspects of living one by one. The first is the material dimensions of living, in which I have pleasure and pain. I'm interacting with nature. I'm studying nature using science and physics and chemistry and biology. I'm using it to convert it into useful stuff using technology. The associated understanding that I want is twofold. One is I have to understand nature. Why does nature exist? All right, this is a fundamental question that I need to have an answer to. The second is, how is nature? Uh, as of today, science has been able to answer and continues to answer a lot of these questions. Correct? We are able to understand uh, plasma states. We are able to, now we have this Large Hadron Collider that's somewhere in the, in a tunnel in Switzerland, and we're able to understand how subatomic particles behave. We understand avionics. We are able to send the Hubble telescope far out into the reaches of the galaxy. We're able to understand the functioning of the human cell and so on and so forth. So all this has been thanks to the scientific method. So science has played a role in us being able to understand how nature behaves. All right. What remains to be understood is, why does it exist in the first place? All right. So this why question needs to be answered. The second is, given that nature behaves in this way, what is my relationship with it? Why does my relationship with nature exist, and what is the nature of my relationship with nature? Am I here to exploit nature, or am I here to coexist with nature? Am I supposed to gobble up the earth, or am I supposed to maintain the earth? Am I supposed to destroy the planet, or am I supposed to protect it? So we need a real answer to this question, because if you see in the world today, there are people who believe both sets of things, right? So we need to get a real answer for ourselves, because unless we get that answer, people like you and me will not know what to do. Right? You won't know whether you're supposed to plant a tree or cut a tree, because there are always going to be theories both for and opposing this particular question. Let's take the second dimension of living, which is the behavioral dimension. This is my relationship with human beings. So the associated understanding that I need to fulfill the behavioral dimension of living is to really look at human beings. So human beings can be seen in two places. One is, I need to understand family. We're all born in a family. We continue to live in a family. We then go on to get married and have families of our own, or in other words, your family expands to include a new person that comes into the family. So we need to understand the institution of marriage and the institution of family. Why does family exist? Correct? Why can't I just live alone? Why should I even get married? Right? If somebody says, if you don't get married, you can't have children. Well, you can have children without getting married. Right? Why are parents even needed? Why should I even take care of my parents, and things like that? So we have to understand the nature of family. You'll notice that the understanding part is all in two questions: why something is and how it is. है ना? क्यों है, कैसा है. When we understand the क्यों and कैसा, the why and how of every aspect of our living, we are able to understand the law by which it operates. We can then understand our relationship with it, and then there is a chance to fulfill it in a nice way, in a coexistential way, in a harmonious way, which then it is only then that you can possibly look at a state in which you don't have any conflict when you live with it. Similarly, we also need to understand society. All of us belong to a societal order. You may or may not like the particular society that you live in. You may or may not like the particular state or county or the country that you live in. But the fact of the matter is, you live there and you have a relationship with it. You go to the shop, you buy something from some shopkeeper. There are events that take place in society. You try and protect yourself from things that you feel are bad in society. You hear about events that take place in society that don't leave us with a good feeling. When somebody dies in an accident, or somebody takes advantage of a little child, a kid is murdered somewhere, or even 20 Indian soldiers losing their lives in a pitch dark night battle. These are things that leave us with a distasteful feeling. So you may be eating a good meal, and then you hear that 50 people died on the border skirmish, and then the taste of the meal disappears. So we are impacted by it, and as human beings, it becomes essential for us to understand what is the nature of human society, why does society exist, and what is the nature of society, and what my relationship with it is. The third dimension of living is the intellectual dimension aspect of living, or the intellectual dimension of living. The associated understanding is, of course, I have to understand myself. Why do I exist, and how am I as a person? All right. Am I just a brain, or is there something more to it? What is the nature of the mind? Is it possible for me to understand myself as a human being by dissecting my brain? Correct? And questions like that. So if I don't understand myself, I am not going to know how to live with myself. All right, I wouldn't know what to do. I'm going to be unsure of it. And of course, if I'm unsure of myself and I'm interacting with somebody else who's unsure about themselves and with me, that is going to lead to a problem, or increases the chances of having a problem in that relationship. The fourth dimension of living is the spiritual dimension of living, excuse me, is the spiritual dimension of living. And this essentially deals with the question of, why does anything exist at all right? Why does reality exist? How does reality exist? So you can see that the word reality, or the cosmos, or the existence, actually includes the other three dimensions. So I too am a part of reality, society is a part of reality, human beings in family are a part of reality, so all humans are a part of reality, and nature too is a part of reality. All right, so the first three rows that you see are essentially what makes up the entire span of our existence. So we want to understand reality the way it is, and I know that science has been trying to help us there, or help human beings try to understand it. Thanks to telescopes and a lot of advanced astronomy, we have a better sense of how vast the universe is, right? Of thousands and millions and billions of light years. So it is beyond imagination. But the sum total of this conversation really comes down to not really seeing, not just seeing how large the cosmos, or existence is, but what is its fundamental nature, how am I related to it? Because somewhere or the other, whatever it is I'm doing on this planet, the existence of the planet, the existence of nature on this planet, my existence on this planet, is to do with the way reality is. So I need to understand this. All right. So if you look at the conclusion or the inference that we have from the discussion on the previous slide, we saw that we have assumptions in these four areas. The associated understanding is, we need to understand why something is and how it is in the right way, right? Not just having an assumption about it, but really understanding it the way it actually exists. All right, so this is what we need to understand. So I'll quickly again sum this up. The four things we need to understand is, understand the why and how of every aspect or of my human living. This is what I need to understand. And to quickly go back, we need this understanding because we want a resolution in that area. Because if I don't have a resolution in that particular dimension or aspect of my living, I'm going to be uncertain, and uncertainty means I'm going to live with some assumptions, and that leads to a state of pain or conflict, or a dissatisfaction, etc. And you can clearly see that whatever it is you do, whether you earn money or not, whether you do well in your exams or not, it is with the end expectation of having a state of peace or of happiness or contentment, etc. So all these experiences, everything that I do, is to become a better person, is to become a happier person, and so on and so forth. So the first thing is, I need to understand myself. The second is, I need to understand others, my relationship with other human beings. I need to understand family and its working, as well as society and its working. I need to understand my relationship with nature. So I need to understand soils, metals, plants, animals, etc. Which again, like I said, science is helping us, or has helped us, or has enabled us, or the scientific method, I should say, has enabled us to study and understand the physical and chemical laws by which these things operate. But we are yet to figure out what our relationship with it is, right? So if I study, the body parts of a chimpanzee, does that mean I'm allowed to eat the chimpanzee? right? What is my relationship with the chimpanzee? Am I supposed to kill chimpanzees or am I supposed to protect them? We've understood how the body of the chimpanzee behaves. We've understood its skull structure and its anatomy, but that still doesn't give us the answer whether the chimpanzee is suitable or is desirable for human diet, and whether we should even be protecting chimpanzees in the first place. So this relationship with nature has to be understood. Just studying nature by itself is not sufficient for a complete human life. The fourth, of course, is understanding everything else. So I've just summarized in an understandable order what we kind of covered in the previous slide. So we have to understand everything else, and this is what you call as reality or existence or the cosmos. This, in a sense, sums up our material, behavioral, intellectual, and the spiritual aspects of our living. All right, so you have the intellectual aspect here, you have the behavioral aspect here, you've got the material aspect here, and you have the spiritual aspect that basically covers all of them. All right, so this is what we need to understand. When I understand these four aspects, so the question that may arise is what happens if you are able to understand this? Number one, I am able to become aware of these dimensions of my living. All right, so if you ask yourself a very simple question, do you want to live with awareness or unawareness? I think the answer that every human being will give is I want to live with awareness. Right? Do you want to be knowledgeable or do you want to be dumb? The answer that every human being gives or will give is I want to be knowledgeable. You can actually try this out. Ask children, ask your parents, ask old people, ask people from different religions, do you want to be knowledgeable or do you want to be dumb? The answer that you're going to get is I want to be knowledgeable. So as human beings, the need to know is an integral part of our existence, correct? It is a fundamental desire in the human being to know. You can very clearly now distinguish that this is a distinguishing factor, or discern that this is a distinguishing factor between human beings and animals. Animals do not have the need to understand all of this. All right, animals already exist as a part of nature. It is human beings that want to understand all of this, and interestingly, human beings can only live a sensible life by understanding all of this. When we don't understand all of this, we don't know what the hell to do with it, right? We don't know what to do with it, and you can see that on the planet. We really don't know what to do with the planet, correct? You don't know whether to plant trees or to cut trees. There are people who say you should plant them. Some people say you should cut them and take out the oil and sell it off, take the timber and sell it off. So we're still trying to figure out what to do on this planet in many ways. The second is when you become aware of these dimensions of living, you are able to, or you can live an informed and alert or a mindful life, right? You don't want to be caught napping. Nobody wants to be told that you don't understand. The third is when you're able to do this, you're able to meaningfully analyze the issues in your life and what their resolution is. Otherwise you just can't make sense of it. If you see, any time that you are disturbed within is when you don't understand how to fix a problem. Let's say it's hot and the fan is on and the fan suddenly stops working. If you don't understand how a fan operates, you're going to get very disturbed. You wouldn't know what to do. You don't know whether so in order to be able to fix it, you know to know how the fan operates. You need to know that it needs electricity. You need to know that there could be a problem with the switch, there could be a problem with the wiring, there could be a problem with the coil, a problem with the capacitor, with the condenser, and so on and so forth. So if you don't understand how a thing operates, when it doesn't function, you don't know what to do with it. Similarly, when life is not going the way you think it should be going, you don't know what to do with it, and that leaves us very, very disturbed. When a marriage is not going the way it should be, you get very disturbed. When a job is not going the way it should be, it gets very disturbed. Disturbing. When your parents don't interact with you the way you think they should be, when your friends don't, it gets very, very disturbing. So when we know the why and what of all these, of these aspects of our living, then we are able to analyze the issues because you know the law by which it operates. So when it doesn't operate, you know that something went wrong in that particular law. So you can go ahead and try and understand it, which is the last point there. You can then make efforts for having a resolution in that aspect of living, or actually have that resolution. When this is achieved, we say you have a coexistence in all dimensions of your living, right? So all of existence, if you see, is essentially a coexistence of these four dimensions of human living, which consist of and in order to be able to do that, you need to understand these aspects, or have these four things to understand, the four kinds of understanding that you need. When you do that, you have a coexistence in all of them. This is called having holistic living, right? So each one of you can decide whether you want to live partially or you want to live a holistic life. When you have that, you have what is called as resolution or samadhan. You have an answer to every why and what, an answer to every Q and kaise, so you know exactly what to do in which circumstance, so it doesn't leave us feeling perturbed. You're not caught on the wrong foot, you're not caught napping, right? And this whole thing essentially means that it contributes towards your holistic contentment, peace, and happiness, which is the last line I have on the slide there in case you missed it. So we progress towards having holistic contentment, peace, and happiness. So living a holistic life or having happiness, peace, and contentment doesn't mean things like consuming less or letting go of things or letting go of money or letting go of relationships. On the contrary, it actually means understanding what all of this is. And it's a good thing that today we are able to analyze all these things in this way, and it is possible to have this understanding. All right. The same understanding can also be seen as having knowledge, wisdom, and science. All right. So what is knowledge? Knowledge is understanding what exists. Okay, it's also called gyan. So gyan is not like a big word that you have to be scared of. It is also not a word to be made fun of, because a lot of, unfortunately, in India you have people who claim to be gyanis and who have actually taken people for a ride, and that's really unfortunate. But gyan by itself is a very nice and a very powerful word. The equivalent word in English is knowledge, but knowledge essentially means understanding the why and how of what exists. When you have knowledge, you then have what is called as wisdom. This is called vivek. When you know what exists, you have the ability to know right from wrong and to be able to discern true from false. All right. So then you get the answer of whether it's wrong to eat a chimpanzee or right to eat a chimpanzee. Whether is it wrong to eat a human or right to eat a human. Right. At some point in time, people were cannibals. They were eating each other's flesh, and in today's society, that's looked down upon. But is there basis in reality for it? Is something that is answered by knowledge. Is it right to cheat in a marriage, or is it wrong to cheat in a marriage? Is it right to do insider trading? All right. Or is it wrong to do insider trading? Things like that. Is it right to take a bribe, or is it wrong to take a bribe? So we get answers to these very, very important questions. Is it right to destroy the planet, or is it wrong to destroy the planet? So these answers are actually possible when we have knowledge, and knowledge is what we discussed on the previous slide. So when you have that, we are able to live with clarity and certainty, because now you've known things for yourself. It's not just because somebody else told you or because it's written in a book, and we are hence able to decipher or imbibe the natural laws of living in us in all these three dimensions. So there is an intellectual law of living, there is a social or a behavioral law of living, there is a material or a natural law of living. So we are able to understand these three laws, these three universal laws of human living based on knowledge. So when you have knowledge and wisdom, what you end up having then is science, right? So then you get the science of living as to what is the science or the art of living with human beings. What is the science or the art of living with nature? Keep in mind that what we currently call as science today is basically studying the nature of material reality. All right. So science is currently studying the material nature of reality. So this is a part of science. The way we've used the word science here is in a much larger sense. So just studying something is not sufficient. You also have to understand how to live with it, and that too forms a part of science. So you have the science of living, which is to live in coexistence, and it is possible to live in coexistence, right? For which we need to have understanding. So which brings us to the last part of this third part of this presentation. We started with the question of what's really beyond academics, what's beyond academics and career and money. The answer is your whole life, and that's screaming to you in red color there. So marks, career, and money are important, but they're only a partial aspect of living. All right, no matter how much you do of it, you're not going to have a wholesome or a fulfilling life if we are not able to look at the other aspects. So how we live with nature, how we live with people and family, how we see people in society and live with it, how we see the neighboring country and live with it, how we see ourselves, and how we understand reality and the larger cosmos is also needed, and these put together are an integral part of human living. This is called the knowledge or wisdom of living, right? It's and you can just kind of read down there. I've kind of just repeated what we've already covered, but all this makes up holistic human living. You can see that a lot of the conflict that we're seeing, like one of India's neighbors decided to grab more territory from India, is because they have assumed they're living to only be the material aspect, right? So if you define a country just by its geography or by its span of control, which means the people running a country, if the people running a particular country, let's say country A or country X or country C, assume that the size of the country and the wealth that it has and the power and influence that it has is the only thing that matters, then they are going to go about destroying other people's lives. So which means they're going to cause a problem in the behavioral dimension of living. They're going to cause a problem in people's minds, and of course there is no question of there being anything spiritual there. All right. So if you just go back to the previous slide, just very quickly, if you see this, focusing only on the material aspect of living is actually called materialism. In materialism, we become a consumer. We assume that individually, as a family, as a society, as a country, and as a nation state, and as a society, it is only the material thing that matters. Correct? So no country is going to stop expanding its borders until and unless it has the entire earth, and that's not going to be possible. All right. So you can see that a lot of the global geopolitical problems we have are also a reflection of this biased or partial mentality that the people running those countries actually have. Correct. So if their mindset changes, hopefully, and it'll change, there is a way in which these problems can be avoided. You stay with the region that you have, and I stay with the region that I have. All right, and I can focus on areas 2, 3, and 4, which are really important for human living. So we were done with this slide, and that brings us to the end of this presentation. This slide again summarizes, what's really beyond academics, career, and money. Hopefully, this little presentation has helped you, start appreciating some of the things that we've discussed here. It's not been a very long presentation, about an hour and a half. It takes an hour and a half to cook a meal. All right, so an hour and a half is not a very long time to give for an important topic such as this, because your whole life, the whole life that everybody around you is leading, the whole life that all of humanity is living, is essentially defined or is around these things. And the good news is all of this can now be understood. And so if you're interested in reading more and kind of getting to know more, you can head to this website, that's coexistence.info. It's the introductory website that introduces some of these concepts. You can, if you want to stay in touch, so there are these workshops that are conducted in which you can study or get to know more about these areas. So you can just head to this website, and if you'd like to stay in touch, just subscribe using email or SMS. You'll find a link in there. It also has some useful resources, some starter resources that you can read through. And of course, if you have any questions, and I'm expecting that I won't get too many emails, but as much as possible, I can probably respond to a few of them. You can get in touch with me at that email ID down there. So it was nice to have this one-way conversation with all of you, and I hope you found this useful, and also that you enjoyed it. So thank you, and good luck with your life and everything else. Bye bye.